Hey, welcome back, Adam and Paul from Proxima. This year, another quick video, a bit of education and some thoughts on insects as a livestock feed today. What do we got, Paul?
Lots of things. So we've been we've been really thrown in the deep end because I think we've realised in the last 2 weeks how little we actually know. You know how they say, the more you investigate, the more you realise you don't know. So we're having that kind of moment. But I also think that we've been equally encouraged and inspired by sort of hearing what's going on in the bigger world of bugs.
I think I've been overwhelmed for a long time, to be honest.
There's just people doing amazing things. I mean, you've got an undergrad in science, so...
True, so I should technically know more.
You should know everything. But anyway, so we thought we'd talk to you guys today just about what we've been sort of learning. And yeah, hopefully you find some of it really interesting. Today we're sort of talking about using insects as livestock food. So yeah, I think we've talked about obviously eating bugs for human consumption. Something we're obviously really passionate about, but for a lot of people, the idea of actually eating insects is still a bit of it's a mixed bag, isn't it? So
which is fine. That's okay.
It is fine, but yeah, I think that using insects as livestock feed is something that pretty much like everyone is like, oh yeah, of course, that makes sense.
Yeah, even recent studies have said, insects as a livestock feed can be a more sustainable source of protein and make the food that we eat more sustainable. And most people in those studies have said, oh, I don't mind eating food that's been fed on insects.
Yeah, that's right.
Is the general gist.
Maybe it'll become so bespoke that people will be like, I'll only eat insect-fed chicken, or else I won't have a bar of it. Is this egg raised on crickets?
I don't know. I don't think eggs are raised on crickets.
No, well, shut up.
Raised on a
Is this or the chicken that laid these eggs? Yeah, okay, we're going to cut this.
On. So the premise of insects as livestock feed is that the insects would actually replace a portion or potentially all, most likely a portion, of the protein that is in the meal or the feed that's being fed to livestock. So whether that's poultry, fish, pork, or potentially beef as well. And look, in addition to that, if you're feeding your insects on food waste, you're also, reducing greenhouse emissions in that respect as well. So yeah, I suppose it hits the sustainability aspect on a number of fronts. And for the people who aren't, open to trying insects themselves, it's another way that we can make a food product that is more sustainable too. So some examples of this are, using soy as cattle feed, which is well publicised that uses a lot of water and a lot of land as well. So if we could, potentially replace the soy needed or the soy protein needed in cattle feed with any sort of insect protein, that could reduce that impact there. And the big one, and probably the more imminent one, is reducing the amount of bait fish that we need to farm from the oceans to feed our table fish like salmon. They talk about it needing 2 to 3 kilos of fish that we fish from the ocean to feed to salmon to make a kilo of salmon. So if we can replace, a kilo or more of the fish that we're feeding to our table fish, again, it's a more sustainable process and we're protecting the oceans that we have at the moment.
Yeah, and I guess like the sustainable side of it, there's even some, there's a lot of potential for, feeding insects off our waste, off our scraps. So it's not like you'd have to grow insects on, pure 100%, grain or like you would for any other animal. So
I think the idea is that using insects doesn't add another step in the process. It replaces part of the process, which is a bit more sustainable.
Yep, that's right. Why aren't we just doing this now? It's a good question, but there are some things that I guess need to be overcome. I mean, not just the fact that it's such a relatively new industry compared to sort of all the other traditional farming methods for protein, but I guess the first one is legislation. So it's a bit of a sexy word, legislation.
Is it?
Yep.
I didn't think it was.
Well,
continue.
Different horses for different courses. Yes. Throw your mind back maybe 30 years and a bit more. You might remember the mad cow disease outbreak in the UK. So what happened was the cows were being fed animal products, so specifically like ground up sheep and
and cow, I think, as
and
well.
maybe a bit of cow in there as well. And so this mad cow disease, which sort of forms, I don't know how it exactly forms, but I think there's sort of, anyway, I'm not the scientist, but the mad cow disease was then transmitted to the cows from eating this swill, essentially, so animal product. So a lot of legislation was sort of written around that idea that feeding any of our livestock swill, namely anything that's an animal product, should be totally out of the question if we're to eat it. Because if you know about the mad cow, there was a couple of hundred people who died from eating beef that was contaminated with this mad cow disease. So it's a pretty serious thing.
We, particularly in the West, have quite stringent control measures for livestock food, and I think that's a really good thing. But it's just an area that needs to take on, have a little bit more research done, I would say, to change either to just confirm that there is no passing on of disease, and potentially even the perception of the producers and livestock rearers for them to buy into this idea that, hey, insect protein is a feasible replacement for some of the protein that you're feeding in your meal at the moment. In other parts of the world, admittedly less legislated than here, people for a long time have been using insects to feed their livestock. And look, there is evidence to suggest that insects don't necessarily pass on diseases to livestock. However, there's just a little bit more work to be done in that area.
Yeah, and I think, I think looking at insects as like a magic bullet to sort of solve all these problems, I don't think we would be, we're not alone in saying we would want the right thing to be done. We don't want someone to go, well, it works 90% of the time, but then 10% it kills everyone. That'd be pretty bad. But insects...
It would be. I think just on your point of insects being a silver bullet, there's probably nothing. Is it silver bullet, magic bullet?
Magic bullet's the blender.
Yeah, right. On the note of insects being a Nutri-Bullet.
A Thermomix.
On insects being the Thermomix of the stock feed world. No, look, on the note of insects being, a one-stop shop, there's, potential cross-contamination and those sort of things. That stuff happens now with grain. That happens with all sorts of livestock feeds. So, stock feed manufacturers track their food and track any, accidental outbreaks that happen. And I think it would be no different with insects.
Yep.
It's just a matter of, changing those perceptions and having the laws and regulations in place to make sure that those things can be monitored and done safely.
Yeah.
I don't think it's too different to stock feeds just using a different source.
That's right.
We're just trying to make sure that source is safe for the most part.
Yeah. So some of the studies that are sort of happening at the moment are about what we can feed the insects and seeing what the outcome of that, and then feeding that on to livestock. But then there further studies, I think we'll see coming out in the next couple of years will be spiking the insect food with something like salmonella or E. coli, and seeing if that gets passed on to the livestock, down the track. So, are insects actually not just neutral, but are they a preventative barrier for some of these diseases? Which I think would be pretty cool if it was.
Yeah.
I mean, that's me just, hoping.
Being hopeful. But look, you can only dream, can't you?
Yeah, because I think if that's the case, we might, something like food waste could really play a massive part in in feeding animals. So if you imagine your local cafe, you could just collect every scrap that came off the plate before it was made, after it was finished. Local coffee shop, every piece of food that comes back that would otherwise go in the bin, we can give it to these insects, which can then eat it, and then the insects we can feed to livestock, and the cycle continues. I mean, that's kind of the pipe dream, really. And some of that is happening in some places in the world, or some sort of variant of that.
Yep.
But I think, like you said, legislation is something that we're cautious, and that humans are not harmed in this, and also animals as well. So we'll see. So anyway, I think that's our video. We're just sharing what we've been learning, and I think if nothing else, it's a bit of an exciting time. We'll probably need to get back to our little side of the shipping container sized modular farm in Banyo, and get our heads down and actually just start doing the work. But I don't know, I would encourage you to just go and Google what's happening. I'd encourage you to go and search for this stuff, and have a look and see what's happening in the world, because some really exciting stuff.
There is. I think it's a really exciting time, and that's what we've been excited about this week. And hopefully it excites you too.
I'm excited. All right, see ya.
Bye.